and welcome to the Amplify Your Voice TV show with Megan Brainers. It's so amazing being back in studio, and on this TV show, we inspire, we impact, and we empower. And I speak to kingdom influencers, marketplace leaders, as well as kingdom authors that are blazing a trail for next generations. So I'm super excited to introduce to you Daniella, who is a kingdom entrepreneur and the director of the discipleship ministry at the church in New York. She's a wife and a mom of two precious children, and she's a second-time author with the first book, Faith Crushed in the Classroom, having been released last year. So Daniella is also a story creation coach and the founder of Network for the Kingdom, which serves entrepreneurs in the areas of books, business, and branding. Welcome, Daniella, to the Amplify Your Voice TV show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Let's just deep dive right into it. Who is Daniella, and where does all your passion and your drive come from?
Who is Daniella? That is a very big question. And if you would have asked me that even a couple of years ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. But just a little bit about me. I, am somebody who is extremely passionate about helping people to craft the messaging around their story. What are the things in our lives that we've walked through, that we've gone through, and how we've overcome those things. And so just a little bit about, kind of my background. I've always loved reading. I've loved reading books from the time I was a really little girl. My mom used to always make these jokes that, when she would try to take something away as like a punishment, she would have to take my book away. And that was the most terrifying thing because I didn't know what was going to happen in the next chapter. So it's not a surprise to me that, my life and now my business really connects with being around stories and helping people to create their stories. I do have a background in education. And I left the education world just 2 years ago now. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that probably later in the episode. But yeah, that's my background with education. I was an English teacher in New York before the major transition took place in my life. So that's a little bit about my background.
That's so amazing. And I'm sure, can you just share with us what was your childhood dream and are you living in it?
Yeah. So my childhood dream, I had a couple, but my biggest thing was to actually be a teacher. I always wanted to teach. I used to, put my stuffed animals, out in front of me on my bed, and I would talk to my stuffed animals and try to teach them something. I had my little chalkboard, and so I was always passionate about that. And then that coupled with the love for books and for reading and literature, wasn't a surprise that I went on to get my undergraduate, my bachelor's degree in English literature. And then I went on to get my master's also in English literature. But then I did a postmaster's certificate in secondary education, focused on the higher grades. So I would say that I'm definitely living out that childhood dream, but in a much different way than I probably would have expected. I think I probably expected the more traditional route, but I'm definitely living it out, just not as I expected.
She's beautiful. She's intelligent. Like, what more can you ask for? So Daniella, just share with us, how did you get to be a part of the Unlock Your Voice International Book Project, and what inspired you to write your chapter?
One of the things that's really great is that we have this social media and we have these platforms where we can connect with people around the world. And I had the wonderful opportunity to be able to connect with you, with Megan. And it was really interesting because I'd seen some of the posts and I was like, okay, I connect with some of the things that you're sharing. And I know I had reached out about interest. And so I felt really drawn to that. And I feel that also just in this season of what God is doing in my life, that it is time for me to share some of my story. And with the book launching, with my first book having launched a little bit before we connected, I just felt that it was right in season, right at the right time. And so that's definitely been a huge blessing in my life. And what inspired me to write this chapter specifically was because it was right on time in terms of the transition period, right before you and I had connected. I had really made a huge change in my life where been going the traditional path of education and teaching, and I was doing it. I was in my career, I did all the things education wise needed to be done. And then we had that huge disruption, which was, the pandemic. And I think a lot of people ended up shifting their careers and their focus. And I never planned to do that for me, but I think God had different plans, and he used that situation to kind of push me in the direction of where I think he'd always intended for me to go.
That's so, so good. We're going to go for a short break. And when we come back, we're going to speak more about Daniella's chapter, and then also how she got to be a story creation coach, and also how she merged her giftings, how she merged her anointings, and also her qualifications, and putting that all together, packaged it into a business. And we are back in studio with Daniella. She's one of the co-authors of Unlock Your Voice, Breakthrough Stories of Kingdom Women who are called to impact the marketplace. Daniella, can you just share with us, what is a story creation coach?
Yeah, so a story creation coach is someone who helps entrepreneurs to figure out the messaging that is from their personal story. So we all have a story, and so much of whether it's your branding, it's a book you want to write, it's, your business, it's the marketing, it's stories. Stories are what sells. Stories are what sticks in the minds of people, actually, with memorization. It helps to tell a story. Jesus told stories, right? More than people being able to understand and retain facts, more than anything, they understand and they remember stories. So one of the things with being a story creation coach is having the ability to look at your life, look at your experiences, and pull out the gold and the story that's living within each of you, which some people say, I don't have a story. Of course you have a story. If you've been through something, you have a story. So that's what a story creation coach does and is.
So you, obviously being the expert in storytelling and messaging, how did you decide on your chapter, and what was the main goal behind the message that you shared?
One of the things that's really interesting is I like to look at the testimonies that we carry, whether that is, our salvation testimony or just to testify of a season in our life. These are like the chapters pretty much of our larger book, which is our life. But each chapter in itself could be a book, right? So this specific period of my life of just being in transition, I thought that it was really important to highlight, because we all are faced at some point. And if you haven't gone through this yet, you will at some point, where you're faced with kind of that make it or break it moment where you're like, either I'm going to do this or I'm not. And I find that God is really gracious, but also really good about pushing forward his purposes for you. So, if you delay it, right, and you're not, kind of catching the cues that you're in transition, he'll make sure that it's time to transition. So I think that was the case for me, because I've always been a very determined and focused person. So if I'm doing a job or doing something, you have to do everything short of like push me out of it, which is what I think kind of happened with me with the whole pandemic and switching careers and things like that. So yeah, that would be why I wrote it.
It actually sounds so similar to my story. And I think that's probably why, we connected with one another, because it was similar points of interest in both our stories was in the pandemic, I was retrenched. And in the pandemic, I was also pushed out of my comfort zone. So I can totally relate to that. But for you, when you were transitioning and you were basically throwing the toys out of the cot, what were the things that you had to process that in hindsight now, when you look back at it, it actually made you resilient?
I think one of the greatest lessons that we all have to learn, which is that God is ultimately the one who's going to provide for us. And so I think from my background, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up with an Italian family. They start working at like 9, 10 years old. It's like whether you're working in the house or you're, going out and learning a trade, it is very valued. Work is very valued and so highly valued. Work and family are like the number two, and then they kind of put God third. But God's like, no, we need to fix that. I'm first, then your family, then your work. So it was like a whole switch. And when I had lost that, I felt like it was almost like losing a part of what felt like my identity at that time. And God was like, no, this is not who you are. It's what I've called you to do. Who you are is my daughter, and I'm going to provide for you, and you're going to know me as your provider and understand that everything that you get in your business is because I've allowed it and I've opened the door for it. So that way, none of it really is of me. I mean, we come, we show up, we do the work, we put our hands to the plow, but ultimately he's the one who's going to allow the harvest, right? Like we have little control over it in sense of it's going to happen when God is saying it's going to happen, but you have to take the steps that he's telling you to take.
Out of everything that we just spoke about now, what would you say is that one message that God is asking you to amplify in this generation? Like, what is it one thing that keeps on coming up when you're writing, when you're speaking, also when you're counseling, right, in a ministry capacity? What is the message that you're running with in this season?
Yeah, and that I think that message is just to trust him in the midst of the circumstances and to be obedient to the last thing he told you to do. Uh, because so often we question and we're like, well, where is my promised land? Like, I've been praying for this thing. Why am I still wandering in the desert? Why am I still hitting all the roadblocks? What is going on? And God is saying, what is the last thing I told you to do? I need you to be obedient with that so that I can take you where I want to take you. So just submitting to the process and trusting him in those transitional periods for sure.
Okay, awesome. So let's speak about the shift that you've been experiencing in business. So for those of you that's watching, we do similar things, myself and Daniella, obviously called to different audiences. So in the one sense, we could have said, no, I don't want to collaborate with her. She's going to take my clients, yada, 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 yada. You know how it goes. I'm not just talking about myself. But I mean, at some point, you actually have to look at it this way. Like, say, we are the body. And we need to pull from one another and pull out one another's gifts, merge it together, and enlarge the kingdom of God. So, Daniella, for you, what made you decide to, okay, there's so many people that's doing the same thing like you. But I mean, you are mission driven, right? So what are those key value points that helps you not to compare yourself with the next book coach? What are those values that keeps you going, kingdom values that you can maybe share with us?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few, but I want to say probably one of the most important ones is knowing what makes you unique. So even though we're all called to different things, the Bible clearly tells us that we don't all serve the same function, and that knowing that in the uniqueness of my own experiences and stories, that gives a level of authority to speak to and to speak into a certain group of people that maybe somebody else may not have. And so I think when you're really clear about who you're called to serve, that in itself is a big part of it. It's, I know for me, I tend to get the folks who don't believe they have a story at all to help them really pull it out of them. And they're like, I didn't even know that there was a book inside of me. And so I think that is also very different from what I've seen, Megan, with even the women that you work with. Some of these women are like more established. They know, like they're a little more confident. Whereas some of the ladies that I've worked with, they're like, is there a book? I don't know. Can you tell me? So, just knowing who you're called to serve, I think is so, so important. So for me, understanding that, understanding who I'm called to serve, understanding what my unique gifts and talents and experiences bring to the table, there really isn't competition in the kingdom. We do things totally opposite of the world. And so I was excited when you asked me on having similar things because I have a similar sentiment, but not every coach kind of feels that way.
It's so good that you shared that because I never looked at it that way. And I also want to say that I didn't decide which group I'm going to serve. Like in my mind, I told myself, I'm not serving any pastors, any apostles, any prophets, any fivefold leaders. And then I heard the voice of the Lord is like, really? We'll see about that. So I find myself in rooms with fivefold leaders. And I was like, I didn't call myself, you chose me. You can find yourself doing the same thing, but you more than likely not serving the same audience. So, Daniella, what are you busy with right now in your community? Just share with us. Is it Network for the Kingdom? And there's some other initiatives you're busy with.
Yeah. So Network for the Kingdom, the story creation that I do with the books is that's the books kind of side of things. But with Network for the Kingdom, it's more of an opportunity to get business visibility for especially coaches that are really just starting out. They're getting their feet wet. They're trying to get really clear about their frameworks and, who they're called to serve and just getting clarity on that. It's a nice place to kind of test what you have going on and to potentially land a client. So we do that and we serve because you need that when you're first starting out. You don't have testimonies. You don't have those things. You're kind of like testing the waters. But we also serve the community as a free group on Facebook. And we serve them by bringing on these people who have expertise. They have value. And we're able to, gain more knowledge for ourselves with their respective areas of influence. So that's one of the nice things about what we do within the network. We also do have partnerships with, coaches who are a little more established and they come in as well and serve the group. So it's a nice place to just grow in learning about all the things of books, business, and branding.
Okay, can you share with everyone some tips or strategies of how to get more visible with your brand?
So as being in story creation, I know some people, they focus on the logo or the colors, and those are really nice visual representations. But what I focus on more is the messaging. Your messaging is so important. And I think that's what helps you to understand what makes you unique. And you're not going to really know that unless you get in front of people and you start working with the people you're called to work with. You're going to start to see, hey, this is the language I'm using. This is what is getting my client breakthrough. And you start to kind of see that unique thing that you bring to the table that it's like, wow, okay, so more than one person has received a breakthrough from hearing that same thing. I say hearing because messaging is what we're reading, it's what we're saying. So I think that is really important, is getting clear on what is your unique message. And a lot of that also does come from our own pain to promise story. So the things that we've struggled with, the things that we've gone through, so we can pull from that place of authenticity and being organic, because it is difficult in this platform. People, I think, sometimes feel as though, coaches may not be authentic. Or they may not have the best interests of serving. And this is what we're kind of up against, this mindset. And being in the kingdom is that we want to come with authenticity. We want to come, with grace and with love, and to know what makes us stand out. And you won't have that spirit of competition then, and you can actually collaborate, which is what we need to progress.
So for the person that feels, but I don't want to collaborate with the next person, like, can you speak on that topic of authenticity and how you got to the place where you are now, rooted in your identity, partnering with God, and then being your authentic self, especially when it comes to the visibility, maybe doing the live, or even speaking on a platform like this, because I know You have an upcoming speaking event, which you can share in a little bit. For those that may be even aspiring speakers, how can you even help them now? How can you encourage them and exhort them as to how they can become more confident with showing up and being visible?
Yeah. So I think the biggest part to that is understanding first, your identity is going to take some healing. It's a healing process. Business is difficult if you are not healed. If you are struggling with rejection or you struggle with your own identity, you're going to always look at what other people are doing to set your value bar. And if you don't know that what you have is valuable, that's going to impact your offer. That's going to impact the time, like all of the things that make up a business. But also, on the other end, if you're overconfident in the sense of it can become prideful. So being in the kingdom, we need to have a heart that is, healed. And I'm not saying you're going to have a perfectly healed heart, right? We're all in this process of growth. But I know that that was the first point that God had to focus on in my life before I could ever have any form truly of platform, because we can hurt people as well. And God doesn't want us to hurt the people that we're called to serve, because that just hurts, your own destiny. He does, he wants you to receive all of those things he's promised you. So my thing would be just to focus first on, if you feel that you have a lot of inner healing still to do, get the inner healing. I have been blessed to connect with some really great heart healing prayer ministers, and that has accelerated me significantly. And then focusing also on your family dynamic. If things are really hard at home, it's going to be very difficult for you to run a business, especially if you're called to online business. So you've got to take care of those first couple bases before you're really able to fully step in. I'm not saying don't research, don't, try, seek God and pray on those things and start taking steps, but you're not going to reach the level that you're called to reach if you don't take care of those first two things first.
You've heard it from the expert herself. Get the healing, because entrepreneurship will show you who you are. I agree with that 100%. So Daniella, speak a little bit about the speaking engagement. I think it's a summit. Can you speak a little bit about what's going to happen during that time?
Yeah, so we have a summit coming up in Network for the Kingdom we're hosting, and it's June 8th and 9th. And it's going to talk about how we discover our unique voice in business. So for those of you who have felt a call to the marketplace, just like with this book, it's actually very timely in connection. If you felt that call to the marketplace, but you're not sure, really sure about how you stand out, you're going to have an opportunity to hear from some really wonderful people who will help you to discover what that is. And so we definitely invite you to do that. The best way, I think, to stay connected is, if you have Facebook, is to connect with our group, Network for the Kingdom. You could just search it up. And if not, you can send me an email for any questions that you might have at connect@networkforthekingdom.com. And it's 4 with the number 4. So networkforthekingdom.com. And I'm also reachable on Facebook, Daniella Ordonez. So
Daniella, before we finish up here, what's next for you?
So next, I actually have another book in addition to this co-authored book coming out. This is the year of books. If anyone hasn't heard this prophetically, it is definitely a year of books. But I have another book that I'm working on, which is Tell Your Story, Turn Your Pain into Purpose. And so I'm really excited to be able to launch that. And that's going to give a little bit more about my story creation framework. For those of you who are asking questions like, is there a story in me? That's going to be a really great thing to look out for, which will be available on Amazon. But I'm launching my free group with that. And you can, same way on Facebook, just search Tell Your Story books and you'll see my face. It'll come up.
Okay, everyone, this is a woman with a powerful, powerful story. feel free to reach out to her via email or via Facebook, or even if you feel led to join the network and the group to get impartation, feel free to do so. Daniella, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in studio today.
Thank you so much, Megan.
So we will see one another again, same time, same place, and I will be introducing you to more of the authors. We still have a few that's lined up, and I'm so excited just to take you on this journey with us, showing you behind the scenes, showing you the breakthrough, showing you the overcomer stories. So we will see you soon. That's it from me, Megan Reynolds, your Kingdom Coach, book mentor, author, and speaker. Bye-bye, everyone.